how do you see the world of lighting changing in about 5 to 10 years perspective? I mean, the reason I'm asking that is because in the past decade, we have seen a lot of changes. We have seen a lot of new things coming out, right? Everything has been evolving really fast. And it's really interesting where is it going, because right now, lighting has started to become a service, not just a commodity, as you mentioned, right? Or not just a luxury, as some of the consumers might think. So where do you think it is going right now, this space?
I would say that the typical lighting industry, right? The typical,
right.
And I'm just talking for the US market.
Right.
The typical lighting industry or the typical electrical distribution industry worked manufacturer, rep, distributor, customer.
Right.
And now that's changing because customers realize they can go direct.
Okay.
And so your feedback loop is being disturbed, because if there was an issue with the light before, you would go back to the distributor would kind of give you a replacement, and then they would go to the rep and say, hey, this is the issue. The rep would go to the manufacturer and then give a replacement, and so on and so forth.
Right.
But now if you have a complicated light, say for example, a grow light, and we have some customers that are trying to use horticultural lights.
Mm-hmm.
Now the technical aspects of that are kind of complicated. So would the customer be benefited coming back to us, or would they be benefited going directly to the manufacturer and talking to them?
Mm-hmm.
So in many instances, they go to the manufacturer and talk to them. Whereas what we recommend is you come talk to us, because the manufacturer is not going to deal with one light, because they're selling in hundreds of thousands.
Obviously.
But this is not something a customer cares about, right? Because the customer is like, I bought the light, I need the service. And so I think what's happening over here, or what's going to happen in the future of lighting, is that to switch it from a commodity market to more of a utility market, I'm not saying luxury, but a utility market.
Right.
There needs to be more training amongst the contractors, because they're the ones installing it. And there's going to be a decentralization in terms of who's holding the product.
Right.
So instead of the manufacturers holding a large portion, or instead of the distributors holding a large portion, it's going to be in transit a lot more.
Right.
So I think that those are the changes that are going to come. So the supply chain and training are the two biggest. Because if you effectively do your supply chain properly, you can reduce the price of your product by 20%.
At the very least, I think.
At the very least, exactly.
Yeah.
On a conservative estimate.
Yeah, I agree with you. As I was saying, a lot of factories here in China are now switching their focus from OEM manufacturing, as in manufacturing for some brand outside China, for example, to starting their own brands, starting selling on Amazon directly. And I mean, Amazon is only one of the examples. Like, everybody starts going with their own Shopify stores and so on and so forth. So this supply chain is getting more straightened out, right? However, it's interesting because as I was doing lighting business myself at some point, I think the biggest issue we faced was the fact that the client wanted the service to be done here now. They did not want to know who is the manufacturer, who is what. Like, I bought it here, something has happened, I'm bringing it back to you, fix it, like this kind of thing. So I'm actually curious how it's going to be solved, because there's still communication issue that has to be addressed, right? Because the manufacturers are still here, they're still thinking in terms of their paradigm. Let's put it that way. And the contractors or electricians in the US, they probably have a very different perspective on that. So it's kind of hard to forecast where is it actually going to go on from here.
Yeah, it's difficult, especially with some Chinese companies that we deal with, manufacturers. One big issue, and I mean, they all want to expand more into the US. They know that any large order over here is a few $100,000.
Yeah.
At the very minimum. But the issue is they don't bring the product to America how Americans want to use it. There's a concept of design thinking.
Exactly.
If you're familiar with it. So design thinking process kind of wants the customer to be centric in the process of using the product.
Yeah.
And that's where Chinese manufacturers kind of lose it, I believe, because they don't do design thinking from a customer's perspective. They do it from a manufacturer's perspective.
Exactly.
What reduces manufacturing costs? How can they cheap out on certain things that they don't think are the most important for that product?
Yeah.
Whereas those value adders are what sells in the US, because it's not a developing country, it's a developed country.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a huge point. If you're working with this company that you are, I think that, that's something that you guys could focus on. And in fact, that's something that Sean Callahan, who's the owner of the company, he and I had discussed, like perhaps even consulting for a few manufacturers in China, so that we can kind of provide them with our expertise of telling them, hey, using these design thinking principles, you should be marketing, labeling, bringing out your product in this fashion, and that would give you higher success over here.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you, because at the moment, most of the products you see on the market, regardless where you look at, they just look the same. So in the end, the client is just forced to choose between the absolutely same looking products within very different price range. And for most people, things like CRI or whatever, they just don't make any sense, so they just go for the cheapest thing. Chances are they will not be very happy with it, and they will just keep switching, and so on and so forth. Everybody knows that story.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Especially the market culture difference, in Asia, East Asia, people are more spec driven.
Right.
And in large commercial enterprises, like if you were going to go and sell to like a hospital or like an airport, the facility manager, the architect would be spec driven. But for most businesses, they're not spec driven; they're usability driven.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big point for manufacturers to note.
Absolutely, usability and how fast the return on investment actually comes, because
and no Chinese riding.
Of course. Of course.